Logan the Layman Critic here. Today's review is for The Crow. It's from 1994 and is directed by Alex Proyas and stars Brandon Lee. Let's talk movies. On Devil's Night, a man and his fiancée are murdered by a gang. A year later, the man returns from the grave, wanting revenge, guided and given powers by a mysterious crow. Now, most who've heard of this film probably know about it because of the accidental death of its star, Brandon Lee. I'm not going to focus too much on that because there's plenty of other places to get that information. On its own merits, The Crow is a well-made picture, and the tragedy of its production shouldn't be its defining feature. I think that undermines Lee's legacy, in my opinion. And this film already had the ingredients for success. Let's start with the visuals. The production design is gorgeously dark. In The Crow, Detroit is a gothic hellscape. It's drenched in rain and blanketed in shadow, and it's a terrifying place. It makes RoboCop's Detroit look like the suburbs by comparison. And having lived near Detroit for most of my life, I will admit that it bears little resemblance to the actual place. We don't have a railway system that runs through the city, and I have yet to see any Gothic architecture, but it doesn't matter. I mean, this really is a whole different world. It could be any city. The name really isn't that important. The only link to the real Detroit is all the arson and crime of Devil's Night, and it lives up to the name. The criminals are all a bunch of disgusting, monstrous thugs. The film frequently gives flashbacks to what happened to Eric and Shelley, the couple that are murdered. This movie is very much a revenge story, and they make sure that there's a payoff in that. Eric hunts down each and every person responsible and relishes taking their lives. And strangely enough, you don't see him as a monster for doing so. As horrific as their deaths are, it does seem like justice. Like he's an angel of death and retribution, which, I mean, he is in a sense. The Crow is there to give him a chance to set things right. The supernatural element is not clearly defined, and that may or may not be a strength of the film, depending on your point of view. I mean, is this God giving him a second chance? Did Eric unwittingly make a Faustian bargain, or is it just magic? We don't know. It's something that may have benefited from being fleshed out, but then again, it may also have slowed the pacing. That's another thing. The Crow moves at a very quick pace. It takes no time in getting the plot going, and that's kind of rare for a comic book movie. A lot of the time they'll spend the first quarter of the film with setting up the origin. With this movie, everything that needs to be said is done within about 10, maybe 15 minutes. The cast is a strong one. Obviously, you got Brandon Lee as Eric, and he does a great job. I haven't seen any of his other work, just a few clips of Showdown in Little Tokyo, which were kind of humorous. Not kind of, they definitely were humorous. It's a very over-the-top movie. But the general consensus is that this is his strongest performance. And he plays the tortured and vengeful soul well. But he also successfully finds moments of warmth and humor without it being jarring or contradictory. You have Ernie Hudson supporting as Sergeant Albrecht, a beat cop that was at the scene of the murder, and he later becomes Eric's friend and ally. Hudson is enjoyable in anything he does, lending that everyman quality that makes him very likable as an actor. The main baddie, Top Dollar, I think his name. Yeah, Top Dollar. He's played by Michael Wincott. The first time I saw Wincott in a movie was Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And he's another one of those actors that I always enjoy watching. He's got that low, raspy, gravelly voice, and he's good at being menacing. And Top Dollar is a twisted dude. I mean, he's got an incestuous relationship with his sister and shares her interest in the occult, cutting out the eyes of victims and burning them as incense while snorting coke. He's a great villain. The movie's weak points are few, but it does have them. Some of the special effects haven't dated well, so one could argue it does lend a certain charm to the movie. It doesn't really bother me that much, but I thought it was worth mentioning. I'd also say that Eric's final fight with Top Dollar is a little underwhelming. It consists of a lot of wide shots, and when you do see the actors up close, their faces are largely in shadow, with the exception of the end of the fight. And you really want to see the emotions of the conflict, so it's hard to get yourself emotionally invested if you're not seeing what's going on in their heads, their facial expressions and their eyes and whatnot. I should also add that Eric's means of victory, while it's not without some setup, it feels a little bit like a Deus Ex Machina in its execution. No pun intended. Yeah, and some people might like it. Some people might be fine with it. Other people might find it a little just kind of out of nowhere. Anyway, I would still highly recommend watching The Crow. If you're looking for a comic book movie and you're tired of all of the Marvel and DC stuff, this is definitely one to see. Until next time, ladies and gentle fellows.